the guy who answered the phone said to me that the job was taken. He said, "Do you know what the job is?" Meaning chef, you know. Then he told me it was taken. And so I had Bernard call back.
Oh.
And he's got a French accent.
Right.
And a thick one.
Yes.
They told him, "Come on down, come on down."
Like 5 minutes later.
Yeah, 5 minutes later the job was available.
And just coincidence.
Just coincidence. So I called them out on it, and I did get the job. But, you know, that's what you had to do in that time. You
That's
know?
amazing. I mean, when you see discrimination, that... Okay. Hello, and welcome to another edition of On the Town. On the Town is a series of interviews with leaders who are helping to make Southbury a great place to live, raise a family, own a business, and retire. I'm Ed Edelson, your host, and today I'm honored to have with us Carole Peck, the owner and founder of and chef at the Good News Restaurant and Bar, which is currently celebrating its 26th year here in Woodbury. Many of you know Carole as someone who is not only an excellent chef, but has been committed to making this a great community through her involvement and support of many activities, including our local farmers, and trying to bring better food to our tables. Carole, welcome to On the Town.
Thank you.
Thank you for
nice
taking the
to
time.
be here.
Well, good. And I think people will be interested in learning a lot about your career and a lot of the path-breaking things that you've had the opportunity to do. But knowing that yesterday was your day off, I'm curious what a chef of your caliber had for dinner last night.
Well, we went out to eat last night. It was my birthday on Monday, so we went to the movies in New Haven and went out to eat, and I had scallops, okay, with oyster mushrooms and mixed vegetables and mashed potato.
Okay.
Okay.
At a restaurant that a competitor of yours?
It's not a competitor. It's one we will visit once in a great while or something. So yeah,
right.
it's in New Haven, Adriana's.
Okay.
They give huge portions. You can't eat it all.
There you go.
I can tell you.
So you enrolled at the Culinary Institute back in the early 70s.
Yeah, I was in the first class that they let women into the school.
Well, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. The Culinary was a male-only school up until the 70s.
Really?
Yeah.
How many women were in that first
There
class?
was in 28 of us to 1,000 men. Yeah. I was young and very tenacious, put it that way, so that didn't bother me at all.
Well, good for you.
Yeah.
And as I understand, you grew up in that area, Newburgh, so you knew of the Institute?
The Culinary was in New Haven still at that time.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The Culinary moved when I was in my second year over to the Hyde Park campus.
I see.
And it used to be part of the Yale Theology School. And it was in these old Victorian houses, and then they had one demo building that was a newer building, but the other one was all in these great old Victorian houses in New Haven, near the theology school. So I went the first year there, and then the second year the school moved to Hyde Park. And that was a Jesuit seminary that they moved to.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that had been a seminary, so.
Wow. Well, interesting times to be there.
Absolutely.
And
I was asked back as a fellowship on a third year, and during that time, they had opened their room now, which is I think called the Medici, but it was called the Escoffier, and I worked there under a very famous chef, Clement Granger from the Pavillon in New York, and I worked under Peter von Erp, and so it was great because it was like a year of teaching. And also a year of learning more stuff and opening this restaurant. So, and that was, it was different times. Food business was totally different then.
Well, I want to come back to that, but if I just go back in time a little before that, when did you have this feeling you wanted to be a chef? Because again, it wasn't a...
I don't think I had a feeling that I wanted to be a chef. When I was growing up, women in my age group were expected to either be a nurse, a teacher, or what else could you be? A secretary.
Yeah.
Right?
That sounds about right.
And, you know, you would marry, take your husband's name, and, you know, that would be it.
Okay.
So my parents really never were good about saying, hey, why don't you become a lawyer or something like that. And they got divorced when I was 13 and made me totally crazy. And I found a job at Howard Johnson's where my sister was working in Newburgh along the Thruway. And she was a waitress there, and they hired me to be a waitress. And then they realized that I was 15 turning 16. And I couldn't, it had a bar and I couldn't serve alcohol. So they asked me if I wanted to go in the kitchen. And I wanted to do anything. I wanted to work. I wanted to be out of the house. You know, all those things that you are when you're 16. So I started working there as a short order cook.
Okay.
As well as going to school. And I used to do pottery in school. I had a school that had an amazing pottery department.
Was that just a public high school?
Yeah. And I wanted to be a sculptor and a potter. That's really what I wanted. That was my goal was, to do that. And because of my sister, she went to art school and then ran away with a hippie to Colorado or whatever. And my parents were back together at that time, and they didn't think they didn't want me going to art school. So my guidance counselor was keen enough to say, why don't you go to cooking school? She knew I was artistic.
That was the...
That was it. She put her finger on the button. And I went.
The chef, Pepin?
Yeah, Jacques Pepin. He worked for Howard Johnson too. And so was another very good pastry chef called, of course I'm going to forget his name now, right?
Well, you're talking to an audience.
Exactly. But Albert Kuman, he passed away already. But he designed like all the cheesecakes and the apple pies, everything like that. He was a Swiss guy. He worked there too. And then Granger, who I trained with the Culinary, he went there. He retired and went there and he helped them too in their test kitchens.
Interesting.
And so it's funny how a lot of us came out of Howard Johnson. But it was an interesting concept. I think it would work very well today.
Howard Johnson.
Yeah, I really think it would work well because the food really was delicious.
Right. You know, I mentioned to a couple of people we're going to do this interview, and they assumed that you were influenced by Julia Child.
Nope.
You don't remember growing up watching
No, Julia
that?
was... I didn't grow up watching Julia.
Okay.
Okay? I mean, I saw her a few times, and I used to say, "No, I'm going to make mock avocado soup with turtles," or whatever she would say, you know?
But she wasn't an influence.
She wasn't an influence at all. As a matter of fact, we were sort of against her at the beginning of my career because she called herself French and she called herself a chef, and she was neither one.
Okay.
To put it, but you know, she had a huge influence and she was brilliant. And
Right.
I met her over the years. She came up to my restaurant at Carole Peck's. I did her 80th birthday party in New Orleans, one of them, and so I knew her over the years, and she was a wonderful person. But, you know, at the beginning when you're young and cocky and whatever it might be, you know, Julia Childs was like, you know, sort of like this.
Okay.
Okay.
But, I mean, when you started the Culinary Institute, did you sort of very quickly begin to feel like this is what I want to do? Because I hear this sort of artistic aspect, and I'm wondering...
Yeah, and in the first 6 months I almost left.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought, you know, I don't know if this is really for me or whatever. And then it clicked. I got into a class where it was, as a matter of fact, a pastry class. And, you know, we started doing these chocolate paintings and all kinds of things like that. And then after that, I went into classes on garde manger, which were the big buffets. And we used to do all this kind of thing, which is called chaud-froid, and make all these pièces montées.
You're going over my head.
Yeah, the cruise ships, you know.
Oh, okay.
But before, you're talking cruise ships years and years ago, where we would do these amazing displays with turkeys and all kinds of things like that.
Okay.
And I loved that.
Because it was more of the arts aspect.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But then the cooking started to take off, you know, because that combination of taste, flavors, also pottery, you know, the dishes that you could put in the pottery and things like that. It was all a combination of everything.
So you mentioned this a little before, that what's taught at the culinary school today versus back in the 70s is quite different.
As a matter of fact, my ex-pastry chef just visited me from Hawaii, and she went to the culinary after she stopped working for me.
Mm-hmm.
She thought she'd go into the food end a little more, and she was just back there a few weeks ago, and she said it has even changed so much than when she's been there. Now you can choose the classes you want, you can do something online, you can do all these kind of things that colleges are doing. They teach more classes, but what's happened now is some of the older chefs who are classically trained aren't there anymore. So it's changed into a whole new type of curriculum in cooking.
Well, and so I'm
not to say it's bad, but it's just different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just feel like there's so much more focus on health and the quality of what
There's
you
focus on health, but look at our population. Everybody's pretty large out there.
Yeah.
Okay. And you know, I'm not being mean about it, but you know, that brings health problems
Right.
down the line.
But
I've lost 90 pounds in my life.
Yeah.
I was up 16 years ago.
I think I remember.
Yeah, and I've lost 90 pounds. Not that it's easy or anything else, but it's just, I feel better for it.
Oh yeah.
You know, and I always eat healthy too. It wasn't even hard for me to start to really say, okay, I gotta do this, because I don't know, just for me it was important, and you can eat very well, deliciously, healthfully, and maintain a decent weight.
Well, one of the things I do want to come back to, though, and I think this is new, wasn't around in the 70s, is the focus on procuring locally, working with local farmers, and the whole idea of farm to table.
That's right.
That I don't think was talked about in the 70s.
No, it wasn't talked about in the 70s. It was Alice Waters opened Chez Panisse in, I think, around 72, 73. She had been in France.
Mm-hmm.
She was in France for a number of years and understood the whole French system, that you use local, wonderful ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to culinary, it was about using good ingredients, but it was also about using exotic.
Okay.
Okay? You
Yeah.
have finding that ingredient that nobody else has. Using that kind of thing, you know.
Okay.
I mean, even then, star fruit was unusual, passion fruit was unusual. So using all these
Yeah.
things that, you know, we were not accustomed to having. So that was a little more the focus there. And the focus at the culinary when I went was classical French cooking.
Mm-hmm.
And classical French cooking is about using good, fresh ingredients. So when I started out on my own, I started following this chef called Michel Gerard in France. And he was about the cuisine of slimness, it was called, Cuisine Mansur, which meant not about being slim, it meant about cutting out some of the calories and fat out of the classical French dishes.
Okay.
Okay? Because he started cooking without using a roux, and that's R-O-U-X, which you hear in cooking from New Orleans and whatever, that they talk about when they make their jambalaya and all that they put the roux in it.
Okay.
And the roux is just flour and butter that you cook to make a thickening agent.
Okay.
So years ago, I mean, that's, if you made soup, anything, basically roux was in everything. I used to have a big round brazier that we made roux in. We'd keep it on the back of the flat top just to use as to have that.
Right.
So when this Cuisine Mansur came into my life, not immediately, but I started changing over into using things without using that roux.
I see.
Without using all that fat and flour and
Right.
everything like that into it. And so I started on this really early on.
And
Maintained it.
And had that as part of your, I don't know, your signature.
Exactly.
That this is what
Exactly. For example, even our lobster bisque that we make at the restaurant, I make that with rice.
Really?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's gluten free. You
Right.
see, and when all this gluten free, people started to have all this problem with celiac and going gluten free. They were like, "How do you know how to cook this way?" Well, I've always cooked that way.
Okay.
I was not so
Nothing new.
influenced. Yeah, it wasn't influenced. You know, when I make a chowder, I don't make a clam chowder with a roux in it.
All right.
And you know, I know a lot of people want that chowder that spoon sticks up in there.
Yeah.
But that's all flour and thickening agent. I make mine with potatoes. And I let the potato be the thickener, but I don't overdo it. That's my cooking. My cooking is light at the same time. It's
Right.
delicious, it's light, it's healthy, it's interesting,
I agree.
and it has all about textures in it. If you watch me plan a menu,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I will say, okay, I want this, this, and this, but oh, there's too much of fennel and everything there. So, and I go back and I said, oh yeah, but we're using tomato in the soup here. We're not going to use it in a dish down there. So in my restaurant, it's very unlikely that you can eat something and have it repeated in the next dish.
Interesting.
It's all part of my, and I compose. I tell people say, well, how do you do that? I say, well, I'm like a musician. I can compose a dish in my head. I don't even have to eat it. I just can like make it
and
all
and
happen,
and you're tasting it in
and
your head.
and I know what's going on.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's an art.
well, I agree.
You know?
And I think the analogy to music, we had, Leif Bjaaland from the Waterbury Symphony.
Right.
And I know when he looks at a score, he's hearing the notes in his head.
Absolutely.
I don't hear anything.
Yeah,
I just see symbols.
absolutely.
And I think for you, when you think of a recipe or read a recipe, in your head, you are putting those tastes together.
Well, absolutely.
And I can't do that either. So both of them are magic.
Yeah, no, it's just a talent that you have.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you hone it, but you don't at the same time. It comes naturally a little bit too. So
Well, if I go back to your career, because again, you're coming out of the Culinary Institute as a minority.
a big minority,
And-
or a little minority, we should say.
So where do you try and go, or where do you go from there?
Where I went from there, let me see, immediately out of Culinary. Okay, I went down and worked in Palm Beach.
For an existing restaurant.
Right, for the Colony Hotel down there.
And basically
And
they
they
would come to the Culinary Institute
No,
to
no, no,
recruit?
no, no. I went down there, and at that time you could look in the paper and find jobs.
Okay.
New York Times used to have chef's
Oh,
jobs
mhm.
like crazy and things like that. So you could find jobs, and so they were looking for kitchen and whatever. And I was going out with this guy, and he and I went down there together. They hired him to be a cook, line cook, and they let me be the pantry girl.
What-
And I got to wear a little white dress
Okay.
because I couldn't wear pants. And the chef there, he was the chef who owned a place in Nantucket, Wisconsin, the Chanticleer. He had just
Okay.
bought in it. And he's a French guy, very nice, but he turned to me and he says, women spoil the sauce.
There you go.
So
All
I
right.
always remember that, okay.
Okay.
So,
But
but I did marry a Frenchman after all
Well,
that,
that's true.
too.
You didn't
I
hold
wasn't
it against all
prejudiced,
French.
right.
Did you have dreams, though, that you would one day want to own your own?
Oh, yes, there was a book written by John Hess, and it was called Giving Good Weight. And it was a story about a chef owning a 50-seat restaurant in Westchester County.
Okay.
And it was a great story and book, and it was like my inspiration.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like, okay,
So
this is
that-
what I want to do.
But
So,
you felt-
but
okay.
being a woman,
Right.
I couldn't, it was hard for me to find a job at that time. As far as, I had to be the pantry girl.
Right. They weren't going
Or-
to make you an executive chef
Right, right,
of a
right.
restaurant.
So,
Which I assume would be true for anybody. I mean,
right, you don't come out of culinary anyway. You need to learn and,
Right.
and so forth. And so I did the pantry there. And then that summer, because the colony used to close in the winter, I got a job up at in Provincetown at Ciro's and Sal's,
Okay.
which was a really known Italian restaurant at the time. Big, like 700 dinners a night and whatever. And they had a girl working there already who did all the pastry and prep, but they didn't have a line cook yet. And Ciro was sort of a woman's liber at the time.
Okay.
You know, it was the 70s, we were Gloria Steinem, all that stuff. And so he hired me, and that was my first big experience of really working. I worked short order cooking, so I was good at that.
Okay.
I could work the line. So now
From the Howard Johnson.
from the Howard Johnsons.
Okay.
So I had all that experience, right? And between Howard Johnson's, when I was going to Culinary, I forgot, I used to work a diner in Valesgate. It was three brothers who had this diner. And, you know, I was just as good as anybody else. You know, I could put out, at that time, if you did a $700 breakfast, it was, that's how you gauged it, was how much we made.
Okay.
If you had a $700 breakfast, you were slamming.
Okay.
Okay. You know,
First, I thought you meant somebody ordered
no, a $700 breakfast. It was means it. So, and I worked this diner too, and then I worked at another place when I was at Culinary up in, where was that, in Copake, I believe it was, New York.
Okay.
It was a place on the hill. It was a Dutch guy. He was pretty good. And then I also lived and worked in my last year there at the Duchess Valley Rod and Gun Club in Pauling. And we had these hunt buffets and everything. And that chef, Peter Von Herp, he was amazing. He worked cruise ships in his career, and he could cook anything, this man. He really was amazing. So I learned so much from him. So I came in already pretty experienced when I finally got this job at Ciro's and Sal's. And I had been working at this place in Stanford for Eastern Foods. It was, we did all the cafeteria and food for these big corporate headquarters that were in Stanford.
Okay. Yeah.
I was at Combustion Engineering,
And when
their
you were there?
headquarters.
Yep.
We had, you know, the dining room of the president. We had the cafeteria.
Okay.
We had another little dining room too.
And again, this is after Cape Cod or after.
This is after Cape Cod, yeah. And this is already when I had met Bernard and I was working already at these places.
Okay.
And I worked with Monique Shea, believe it or not, back then.
Woodbury.
Yeah.
Just coincidence.
Coincidence. She was managing one of these places, Richardson Merrill, with the same company.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran into her a few times because when I first started with the company, they would move me around to be chef at different spots, you know,
Okay.
to try out. And so I ran into her and we became fast friends, even though she's Bernard's age. She and I became fast friends, and she was living in Stanford, and I became friends with her. I used to swim in her pool and all kinds of things.
Now, were you able to put your signature on dishes at this point?
No.
It was pretty much
No. This
you've
was
got to follow.
yeah. And you were. I mean, I was cooking what I wanted to in a certain way, but within guidelines.
Right.
You know.
No, was it?
Yeah.
You ordered. You were.
Yeah,
a
you
boss,
know,
yeah.
you were making sole meuniere or whatever it might be, and you know, doing that kind of thing, which we still do. We still do classics. It's not like we don't.
Okay.
You know, I mean, people. There is a lot of new things in food, but at the same time, there's only so many ingredients.
Well, the first restaurant you own is up here in New England?
No.
Okay, the first one where you're the boss?
First restaurant I owned was with Bernard. This is what happened, okay?
That's
So
right.
I was working, I knew Monique, whatever, and she says to me, she owned a condo in Fort Myers on the beach.
Okay.
So she let Bernard and I use it and go down and check it out and that sort of thing.
Okay.
And we did, and I found a building for lease, and we decided we would open a restaurant in Fort Myers, right downtown. It's not there anymore. We went back a few years ago to see if it was still around, but they had torn the building down, and now it was a parking garage.
If you don't mind, what did you call that restaurant?
That was called Yo Greens.
Okay.
All right.
And what was...
Yo Greens,
It's...
frozen yogurt had just come out.
Okay.
All right, we're talking early 70s, like 75. No, it must have been like 78.
Yeah.
Okay? 78, 79, around there. And frozen yogurt had come out. It was the big rage. So I decided I was going to do a restaurant using frozen yogurt and salads and quiche, and it was all that. It was very healthy kind of food
Okay.
already. I was making bouillabaisse down there in Florida at the time. My night menu was like outrageously good and interesting. And we converted an old jewelry store into this little restaurant.
Okay.
And one night it caught on fire.
Whoops.
And the firemen came in and they destroyed the place. I know they had to do something, but they destroyed it. I mean, they hatcheted all the dishes, all the shelves. It was, and because of that, the fire went around like the whole building because it was like a curve. So that was a disaster. We didn't go back and do that. We ended up leaving. We were living on our boat at that time. We had bought a boat and we're living on that. So that's how we ended up going up to Hilton Head and I was working at Hilton Head. I had 54 people in my kitchen. I was running 3 operations. I was 24 years old. We were living on our boat. Everything was wonderful. And then Hilton Head went into receivership.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
we went in. I went to put my key in the door on a Sunday morning and nothing worked.
Okay.
Yeah, the feds had come in, IRS had come in and shut down basically the island at that time. So, okay, no job.
Wow.
You know,
Right.
and it was my first really big job, and it was great, and I was doing very well, and you
That's
know.
a huge. And when you said 54 people, that included
In my
waiters?
kitchen. No,
Just
that
in
was
the
just
kitchen?
that was all the kitchen staff. Yeah, because I had 3 different operations I was running. Yeah,
That's a lot of responsibility.
yeah, it was, but I was up for it. It was no problem.
I mean, your work ethic is
So-
really pretty high.
so anyway-
you were not afraid to work.
After that happened, it's like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? And lo and behold, again in the paper, there's a job in Aiken, South Carolina, and we're in Hilton Head, which is not that far, so we
Okay.
drove out to Aiken. And that job really was the job I think that started me on my whole self awareness and of what I was doing as really
Okay.
being a chef and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That job turned me because I had this manager there, Mr. Z. He was this Polish guy who was trained in England and whatever, and he was tough, but he was nice at the same time. He liked me.
Okay.
So he and I got along, and he knew a lot about food, and he taught me other things that I hadn't even learned in the kitchen because he had been a chef and whatever. And there I was starting to do private events for people too, because the club, we would do lunch every day because it was a golf club, and then we only were open 3 nights a week, like Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. So we started doing private parties for people in the clubhouse or whatever. And that started me really even thinking more internationally, because I would do these buffets, I could
Okay.
do Malaysian or
Right,
whatever it might be. I would come up with a theme for them and we'd do this stuff. And at the club they liked me so much there that I used to be able to basically make whatever kind of special I wanted. So so that really propelled me into thinking deeper and getting more involved with a lot of dishes.
I mean, do you think you were establishing a reputation at this point, or you were still kind of just in the back, in
No,
the kitchen?
I already had a reputation with the members and so forth like that,
Okay.
Because there was even some at that time who said they would back you, not that they ever did, but if you ever wanted to do something,
Right.
you could count on me and
Right.
whatever. So yeah, I was starting to have a reputation after that.
Well, if we just fast forward, except you, now I guess in the mid-90s, you decided to come back to New England.
I came back to New York in '86.
Oh, that's, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's New York City?
Right, New York
okay.
City.
And,
I was in Miami just before I came back to New York. I opened Fisher Island down there.
I remember that well.
Yeah. So I opened Fisher Island, did that, and they got
Just,
in.
maybe we should just say a very exclusive
Yeah,
residential
Fisher Island
area
is-
right off of
yeah.
Miami Beach.
our first resident there was Freddie Laker from the airline.
I
Yeah,
don't-
after Fisher Island was a wonderful experience. It was good.
Did that
But
have your
they
name?
brought in a new manager, a new food and beverage manager. I was executive chef.
Okay.
Okay, then you have a food and beverage manager over you. And they brought in this new guy, and this new guy wanted his own chef in. So that was, they didn't fire me, but they didn't make it that, you know.
You knew you were welcome.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not
And I
welcome.
probably should have gone against them. Because a woman at that age, time and whatever, you know, it was, they were pushing me out.
Right.
I should have, but you know, I was not that kind of person to be on the let's battle with them. But it definitely was a discrimination situation because they loved me. I mean, seriously, they'd given me bonuses and all kinds of stuff. Then they brought in this new guy, and all of a sudden, I was chopped meat. You know. So after that, I decided that I was either going to go to San Francisco or New York. I needed to do, I felt, a bigger city to increase reputation and whatever. I was in Texas
You've had only one life, right?
before I went to Miami. I was in Texas. I had a restaurant in Austin.
Well, I assume each one of those experiences you pick up.
Yeah, in Austin, I was written up all the time. I was in Texas,
even different foods, different ideas about food.
Absolutely. And it's funny, my
Ingredients,
restaurant in Texas was called La Provence.
Really?
Where I have my house now,
Yeah,
you know. I had never been to Provence, but
But you were in Texas.
But Bernard knew about it.
Okay.
And it was lovely. And, you know, I was doing sort of Southern French cooking. We would have the governor in, and it was a very political restaurant because it was right downtown Austin.
Right. But again, you were not the owner there.
No, I had a partner there.
And you co-owned.
Yeah, but
So,
she owned 52%.
Okay.
When I came to New York, I got a job with this Greek owner, and he had a diner, or he still might, a very successful diner, and he wanted to open a high-end Mediterranean restaurant.
Okay.
And he hired me, and we did that, and you know, I got 3 stars in the New York Times, and it was funny because the beginning of that article was, we were wondering what the next new food trend was going to be, and this it is. It's Mediterranean, you know. So I was already doing all that kind of cooking, as I talked about.
Okay.
You know, keeping it light, beautiful.
Right, and you have the opportunity to do it your way.
And now in New York, I'm doing it too now. So.
And how long were you in New York?
I was in New York for 2 years.
I mean, it's a tough environment.
Yeah, it was tough, and you know, I'm sort of used to living in the country.
Okay.
You know, I grew up in a decent sized house. You know, even wherever I lived, except on the boat, we always had houses and that kind of thing. And you know, I like, as I said to somebody, I like city living because of all the choices you have of food. You can walk out your door and pretty much find from all over the place. But at the same time, I don't love all the people and all that. You know, I live in a beautiful old cider mill here. I'm not going to find that in New York, or, you know.
Not
and
at
to
all.
live in a place that size is not so easy.
Well, so you out of New York? Do you come to?
I come to Connecticut.
Okay.
That's when I met Ruth and Skitch. They had the
Hendersons, who over in New Milford.
Right, who had the silo in Hunt Hill Farm. The reason I came up here is when I was at Pauling, Dutchess Valley Rod and Gun Club, and at the Culinary, and I was living in Pauling, we would come to the Mayflower to come have dinner. Okay, Peter, Ruth, and I. And we'd have dinner over there, and they were continental food. It was sweetbreads, it was all that kind of stuff. So when I was in New York, I decided one day that I would drive up, and I took one of my cooks with me. Bernard was doing something. We drove up this way because I wanted to find this Washington, Connecticut. I remember it, but you know, but
from way back.
Yeah, from way back.
Okay.
And driving, don't you know, I pass the old Mary Dugan's.
I don't know.
That's where Carole Peck's was in New Milford on 202.
Okay.
So, and it's closed. There's a police sign hanging on it. So I take down the number, I stop, and I said to Chris, who was with me, I said, "Oh, look how charming, this little place is. It's for lease. How let me give it a try." So I go back to New York, and I call David Clem. He was the realtor on it, and he says, "Well, there's already 11 people who are interested in that place."
Okay.
And I said, "Well, maybe I could be the 12th and see if they want it." I knew Ruth and Skitch, who they were.
Yeah.
I knew their reputation. I knew they were in the restaurant business. The silo was pretty impressive. And so I sent in my resume, whatever. And about a week later, I got a call that Ruth would like to meet with me. So I met her in the city.
Okay.
Okay. And we talked and so forth, and that was it. Gave her my resume. And then about a week later, David called me back, and he told me what the terms would be if I would be interested and whatever. And before I knew it, I was moving to Connecticut in the spring of '88.
Okay.
And I opened Carole Peck's.
This is the part I don't really know much about. It was called Carole Peck's. Just Carole Peck's?
Carole Peck's, that's all.
Not
it was.
Good News or anything like that?
No, it was Carole Peck's.
And I guess I missed something here. Were the Hendersons
They owned the
partnering?
building.
Oh, you were leasing from them.
They owned the
I
building.
See. Okay, and they wanted it. They
had
wanted a
they
restaurant.
had the matter.
I thought at first you were just saying, putting a bid on the.
Yeah,
lease
no. They were the ones who decided
Okay.
who they wanted in there.
And so now you've got complete control.
Now I have
think.
complete control. Okay. And now I'm doing something crazy like opening Wednesday through Monday and changing the whole menu twice a week.
Twice a week.
Twice. Handwriting it.
Okay.
Okay, because I have nice handwriting. I'm left-handed and I have nice. Then finally, maybe about 2 years into it, I realized I could change it once a week.
Right. I think that'll be enough.
Right. And then I went to once a month. So this is all my experience. And I moved up here with the intention that I was going to use local.
You
At
knew that
least.
already.
Yeah, I knew that already.
I mean, that sounds way ahead of most people at that time. Most restaurants.
It was.
Okay.
It was. That's all there is to it. It
Right.
was.
Okay.
You know?
Well, good for you.
Yeah.
So how long do you stay in New Milford?
I'm in New Milford about 4.5 years, and I sell the place. Okay.
Okay.
Because I have a job offer now in Boston, in Cambridge. There's a hotel up there who wanted me to come and do a Mediterranean fish restaurant. So, in the meantime, I sell Carole Peck's to a Frenchman who called it a very stupid name, the Petit Marmiton.
Okay.
And I know from years of experiences, if you're going to use any foreign language, you better use a word that Americans can pronounce and know. The
Makes
Petit
sense.
Marmiton was not one of them. He lasted 1.5 years or
Okay.
something after me. But anyway, to get back to what was I saying?
Well, you
before?
went up to Boston, or I guess
Yeah,
it sounds
so-
like you were recruited.
So yeah, I was recruited to do this restaurant, and we're just about ready to finalize everything. And they say that the owner of the hotel, because this was a management company I was talking to,
Okay.
the owner of the hotel has decided that Michaela, who was a pretty known chef in Boston,
Okay.
was going to do the restaurant. So,
Boom.
boom, blown out of the water, right?
But you've already sold.
I've already sold.
So you're
Okay, I'm still catering because I was catering when I had Carole Peck's too.
right.
I was doing a lot of off-premise catering at that time, weddings and everything. So I'm still catering, and now I'm gonna have to cater for my house and look for a job.
Had you already moved to Woodbury? When
No,
you
we were living in Cornwall still.
Okay.
Okay, and so this realtor that we knew from around calls us and he says, the good news, where good news is now, is available for lease. So we went down, and I was meeting Bernard. He was coming from somewhere else. And I remember I rode by the place like 3 times and didn't find it. Like, I missed it. Like, where is this place?
Right.
But we meet with Gary Hardesty. He was the owner at the time.
Okay.
And, you know, it didn't seem like it would be a bad deal. And now that the other deal is off and whatever, maybe I should do this. But again, do I want to own my own restaurant? You know, restaurants are hard. They're nicer if somebody else is paying the payroll and,
Yeah.
you know, all that kind of stuff. But enamored, of course, because I love decoration. I love creating things. Bernard loves it.
Was it a restaurant?
Yeah, it
before?
was. It
Okay.
had been called CT Nutmegger. It was sort of like a steak place with a salad bar and
Okay.
that kind of thing. But it had been closed. It had been closed already for 1.5 to 2 years.
So the connection with Monique Shays had nothing to do with...
No, oh, but in the meantime, when I moved back up here to Connecticut,
Right.
we had lost touch. Monique and I had lost touch.
Of course. I mean, not of course.
Yeah, but it
happens.
happened. And when I moved up here, don't you know, I was driving to go to Hartford for my liquor license, and I see that little heart, and Monique Shen, I know it has to be her.
Sure.
Antiques, you know, I know it did. So I stop in, and lo and behold, it's Monique.
Okay.
So we hook up again. So we were already friends again, and now, you know, she got really friendly with Bernard, and, you know, because they're the same age, French, whatever. So we're friends for life now, all of us. But so I'm here looking at this place, and we come back and we said, well, you know, it's very interesting, but we need to change the color of the place, the outdoors.
Okay.
I said, because I rode by it 3 times and didn't see it. I was looking
Not
for
a good
it.
sign.
Not a good sign. I said, I can't find it. So that almost killed the deal. Because Gary Hardesty's wife didn't want us to change it to that green. We wanted it. It had been a charcoal gray.
Okay. Well, Carole, you know, you're getting to Woodbury is quite a story in and of itself.
It is.
And there are a lot of other things I'd like to talk to you about, but I'm thinking maybe, would you mind coming back some other time and
Yeah,
talk
that'll
a
be
little bit
fine. Yep.
more about what you've done in the community and,
Okay.
and, you know, and the success of the Good News Restaurant and Bar.
Okay.
And I think there's more to talk about, and then food and food trends. But it's been fascinating to hear. I knew some of these pieces,
Yes.
but to see it all together and what you experienced, again, being a woman in a man's world.
Totally.
I think in and of itself is an important story for people to know about.
Yeah, well, I was, another little anecdote just before we close is that I had 3 younger girls in there a few weeks ago, probably, you know, mid-20s.
Okay.
And they didn't know who I was. You know, I go around and talk to people, and they
Definitely.
didn't know I was the owner or whatever. And I started talking to them about being a woman in this profession a little bit, you know, and then the one turns to me and just their terrible attitude. Are you our chef for tonight? I said, you're not getting it.
Just one shot.
Yeah,
just give me one shot.
I said, you know, we've done a lot to make you be able to just come out and
Say that.
yeah, without to just be
Yeah.
like, okay, you know, it wasn't so easy coming up in this profession.
Well, and to a little bit to what you just said, doesn't mean it lasts either.
No,
So
No,
we shouldn't take any of this
exactly.
for granted.
exactly.
That,
So
the battle is over. But again, I want to thank you for your time today and a fascinating story.
thank you.
And for our viewers out there, please stay tuned to future editions of On the Town, where you'll get to meet other very interesting people who have a lot to do with why this community is such a great place to live.
And come visit us at Good News. Closed Tuesday.
One of the few things I know now.
Closed Tuesdays.
Made that mistake many times.
Yeah.